This is Alliance Insight. This is going to be a Horus version of what is otherwise a pure White Forest deck profile. So I want to talk about the ideas behind this, why you would want to play Horus, more specifics on the card choices I've made, the extra deck, and also I'll show you some gameplay afterwards. Okay, so first of all, everyone knows that the Horus engine can make rank 8s, and it's also kind of like a grindy engine where if you keep Sark on the field, then you probably win if the game goes into a grind. But there are a couple other niche utilities of having this in your deck. First of all, if you can't play Fiendsmith, which is debatably likely in Alliance Insight because they're probably going to hit the Fiendsmith stuff, you don't have a really good way to Ash check before committing to your White Forest engine. So with the Fiendsmith stuff, you typically go Engraver, search Tract, activate Tract. And Tract is basically the Ash check. Most people will Ash the Tract and not the Requiem, because if you wait for the Requiem, you allow the opponent to set up some degree of resource game just on Fiendsmith stuff without having committed any of their other engines. But whether or not they Ash Tract or Requiem, they will still Ash one of them. And so that allows you to resolve, whether it's your Tails, your LZ, your Sylvie, your Arciela, your Field Spell, whatever it is, the Engraver into Tract is a really, really useful part of the deck just because of the Ash check. So Imseti, because it trades very poorly into Ash because you're losing another card, most people will certainly or almost certainly use Ash on the Imseti. And that means that when you have hands where it's like, okay, you need the Field Spell to resolve or the LZ or whatever, you can very easily see if your opponent has Ash or not. If they don't have Ash, and you go into like a Zombie Vampire or a Photon Lord, then you can check for something else. Like if you Zombie Vampire and you're about to mill 4, especially game 1, when you don't know what your opponent is playing, they may Imperm or Veiler the Zombie just because they don't want you to know what deck they're on, and then you can continue playing with the rest of your engine. So you can see why this engine is pretty useful for doing hand trap checks that you can't really do with just the White Forest engine. I am playing hand traps here. The Call By and the Ash are because Charmies are so good against us. I'm also playing 2 talents. I kind of wanted to have at least some spells or traps in my non-engine just because this is a deck that likes to have access to spells and traps. Also, if I didn't mention it, the Imseti, despite obviously allowing Tails to reset itself, is a spellcaster. So just Imseti and Tails allows you to put Imseti on board, use Tails if you want, or because you have level 2s, you can easily go into a Light and Dark Chaos Angel pretty early on. There are lots of pushes that the Horus engine allows you to perform. Okay, in terms of the extra deck, I want to talk about Dugaris briefly. I am not playing Susurrus in this list. I think a lot of the people that are concerned about Nib are playing Susurrus. So there are some other ways that you could play around Nib. One thing that you can do, so if you read this one, the second effect, where you skip your main phase 1, also special summon a monster from your grave and defense position. This does not lock you on the thing you bring out. So if you get nibbed and you bring back your Diabel, for example, the Diabel does not have its effects negated. But then you're stuck with a Dugaris on field that doesn't do anything. So one thing that you can do is, let's say you have like a Rusia in your hand. This is a very easy play to make. You have a Rusia in your hand and a Sylvie in the grave, you get nibbed. You bring the Sylvie out after you get nibbed, so you can special the Rusia from your hand. You go into the Dugaris. Dugaris brings back that Diabel, and now you need only one more body to go into a Little Knight. Obviously, you can't do this if you've used the field spell, so you have to think a little bit. But going into a Little Knight is very useful in this particular scenario because you banish the nib that would otherwise run over the Diabel that you just brought back. And so playing through Nib, if you end on like a Little Knight and a Diabel, and then you have whatever non-engine, is, not the worst thing in the world. There are also lines where you can make Chorozo, which I think is still a horrible card and I don't like it, but with Dugaris as well. So you can hold an Azet sometimes, do the same thing where you do Dugaris to try to bring something back. You go into Chorozo and then you special a held Azet from your hand to go into like an Arciela. So that makes more sense if you're trying to force other things before you're doing your Diabel ladder, so you still get to complete that. So yeah, just mentioning that. I'm playing Doom Dragon just because I want to test it, and that's pretty much all that I have to say about the main deck. Okay, so let's go into some of the replays now. I have 4 of them, and I'll keep the probably the best game for last. So first of all, going against a couple hand traps. So here's a hand where you draw Happy, that's unfortunate, and then you have the LZ and the Tails. Now you know that you want the LZ to resolve, so that means you do the Ash check. So we activate Imseti, we send the Happy, they use Ash, okay fine, so we LZ pitch Tails, go for the Sylvie. The thing about summoning Sylvie here is you have to remember that if they have Imperm or Veiler, they're not necessarily going to hit the Sylvie here unless they have like a third interaction. They will often save it for the Arciela, so you have to be mindful of that and how you play. So here we go for the field spell, we search for the Azet, special the Azet, we go for Arciela, we send the field spell, and here we get Veilered. Now obviously, we're not going to shuffle back the Arciela to bring out a useless Sylvie when we want to go for the Diabel ladder. So we accept the Veiler, and I make a number of mistakes in these replays that I think is useful to show. If you think that you can get to Diabels, there is no reason to search for Adjudicator, and this shows why you need another target for the Azet searching a Sinful Spoils card, because otherwise you have to search Adjudicator. But you can always get to the Adjudicator off the Diabels card. So even though he Veilers the Arciela, we haven't used the Tails yet, so we know that we can get to the Diabels, and that means that searching the Adjudicator is a mistake if you have another Sinful Spoils target for Azet. If you don't, then you have to search this and you're going neg 1 in the combo. So here I activate Tails, I search for Diabels, and now we can establish a pretty strong board because this will go into Diabel, add back Tails to send in the opponent's turn, and then we still have the Diabels and the Adjudicator. Okay, so going into the next game, this is against Labyrinth. So here I open kind of a weird hand. I activate Field Spell, and I'm like, I really want this to resolve, because if it doesn't, you know, he like ashes or something, I basically have to talent draw 2 and hope that I get Engine. But he doesn't ash, so I LZ, send, we get the Sylvie, we normal summon the Sylvie, and here is the ash, which is kind of like a weird place to ash. I guess maybe like sometimes it feels bad to ash the Field Spell is the first thing because it's like they could have any other engine in hand and they're just going to combo anyhow. So anyhow, I get to talents and look in the hand. I can't check in the log on or maybe I can, but I'm not gonna. Anyhow, I put back something and he has a Fenrir and 2 Arianas in hand. So now I'm like, okay, I can sequence any order I want. It doesn't matter because he has no more non-engine. So I go for the Arciela. Here we have Tails, Adjudicator in hand, Imperm in hand. We get the Diabels, which is why, you know, like searching Adjudicator before was totally useless and just a waste of a resource. Because we can dump the Curse. The Curse can give us the Filius, and the Filius would give us the Adjudicator. But we already searched for the Adjudicator, so, you know. So yeah, here we end on 3 Diabel cards and an Imperm, and then a Tails that we want to send. Yeah, I could have shuffled back the Arciela and brought out the Sylvie and gone into an Execute and turned the Diabels and the Sylvie into Execute, but I felt like I didn't need to use those resources, and so I was just going to play this way. So here he summons Fenrir, I Adjudicator, and I bring out the Mystic, and I just place 2. You may be wondering, like, why place LZ? Don't you want to add the LZ to hand? So you can't add LZ to hand by bringing out Mystic, because Mystic is an illusion, and it has to be a... During your opponent's turn, if a light spellcaster tuner is special summoned to your field, then you get to add it back. And this is an illusion, so you can't add it back off of that. So here he summons Ariana, uses effect. I go Chainlink to Diabel, sending LZ as cost, so I'm still going to be able to add it to my hand by bringing out, you know, like a Arciela or a Silvera, and then I can Chainlink 3 Imperm target Ariana. So yeah, now he chains the Chandelier thing, which doesn't really matter to set Big Welcome. But I bring out the Arciela, I can send the other Azet that Mystic placed, and the Arciela searches. So I forgot that I had not put in Veiler into this particular build because the Arciela was supposed to search for a Veiler, thinking that his only play left was to make Typhon, and I would just Veiler the Typhon. But I didn't have the Veiler in at this moment, so I couldn't do that. And so he does get to clear a few bodies, but like I'm so far ahead that it doesn't really matter what happens next. So there he scoops it up. Okay, now against plants. So I mostly play in Europe, which means I have no idea what this deck does, and I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. So he uses Unexpected Die. I don't ash because I don't know what to do. He activates Sunvine Sowing, which he hard draws. I know that. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to... The thing that he's supposed to search that he hard drew, I'm just going to ash that and see what happens because I don't really know what's happening. He talents to draw 2. And a lot of these builds don't play hand traps. So I'm thinking that, you know, like... The way that I play my hand may be assuming he doesn't have hand traps because a lot of these builds are just on breakers. And he decides to go for like a kind of a high roll play, or maybe this was the only play where he goes for the Dance Peony, hoping to like get something else, but he doesn't. So now he just has the Con sheet play where he can tribute one of my monsters and then take control of one of my monsters. So it's a pretty good interruption, but if that's the only thing that he has and he doesn't have hand traps, then I'm probably fine, right? And I'm already thinking that he doesn't have hand traps, except I see that there's an Ash in the grave. So yeah. I normal summon Sylvie, and that means that even if this gets interrupted, I have a Tails that I can, bring out the AZ or the LZ or whatever. I go for Field Spell, activate Field Spell, search for LZ, send LZ, and so here is like his first opportunity to use the sheet to tribute one of my monsters and take control. And he's probably doing it at this point because he thinks like his board and hand are not good, so my hand has to be bad for him to have a chance. And so he doesn't want me to have the opportunity to complete the ladder and just hopes that I've, like basically bricked or I just have non-edge in my hand. But I do have a way to continue playing because I can special the Diabell and I can bring out the Adjudicator. And now I can basically do whatever I want. Seeing that I pop an Evenly, which was his back row, makes me think that like, okay, he did have an Ash in his deck, but like if he's on Talents Evenly, he probably has like, maybe it's just Ash, you know what I mean? And maybe it's just like, maybe he's just playing Ash called by for the Charmies, like same as us. So I'm thinking he probably doesn't have any more hand traps. So yeah, the Tails resets itself. I can summon the Stellar off of Azet's effect, bring out Rusia, do whatever I want. I draw into a King Sark, which is crazy, make Diabell, Photon Lord, activate Sark, have access to Imseti. I can do whatever I want at this point. I make Legatia for a pop draw, bring out Happy. I can go for another Synchro 12 here, and so he scoops. Now for the only like really actual game we have against Striker Yummy, and I have not read the Yummy cards. So I begin again with a hand where I basically know that the Field Spell needs to resolve. So I have an Extender in Azet, but the Field Spell is my only rail starter, and I don't want to risk getting ashed on the Field Spell, and then I have to hope that Imseti Zombie Vampire resolves to play. So I lead with the thing that doesn't have to resolve. It does get ashed. I keep Imperm in case Droll is not good against whatever his deck is, and also because it's a Speller Trap. We search for the LZ. He's already used Ash, so I'm not fearing Ash on the LZ. Go for the Sylvie, Sylvie for Tails, so I'm feeling okay. I Arciela, and he doesn't Imperm or Veiler, so now I'm thinking that he either has Nib or like nothing else. So now I go Azet, we go for Diabell, and I add back, was it the Subversion? Did I pitch Subversion and add back Subversion? I can't remember. So now Diabell's dumps the Curse, and Curse adds Phileas, and then Phileas can get Adjudicator. This is why you never want to search the Adjudicator off of the Azet. So, it's just really poor resource economy if you do that. So here I go for Execute Dragon. I feel like this is a pretty standard end board in the pure White Forest where you have Diabell, you have Adjudicator, and then the Execute was made off of the tuner you brought back and the Diabells, unless you feel like you need the Diabell's protection effect. Okay, I also have an Imperm set. I have a Tails to send off the Diabell, and I have a Rusia for, like Extender on the next turn. Here he goes Metaltronus, and he targets my Diabell, and you can't respond to the Metaltronus with a thing being targeted. So I decided that I'm going to chain Adjudicator to pop his whatever. It does nothing, just because I want to get the Mystic on field so that I can use that to synchro off with whatever I want. And I'm trying to remember, I think maybe I was doing that in case he chained something else that I would be able to use Diabell and send the Tails at this point, which is like kind of like a unlikely thing to happen. But because I wasn't sure what he was going to bring out, I was like, maybe I should just make sure I have the Mystic on field right now. So I bring out the Mystic, he brings out Nib, and I Mystic plays 2 because it's free. Now, I think he makes a mistake by going Battle Phase because, of course, I don't have to use the Execute Pushback. I can just use the Battle Phase effect because I already have 2 monsters here and pop the Nib. So I pop the Nib. He makes Kagari. So I don't know if he's on Pure at this point. So I Imperm the Kagari thinking if he's on Pure, he probably loses right here. But then he goes for the Yummy stuff. And I'm like, I don't know what these cards do. I just have heard that, if they have a Link 1, they can turn that into something good. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to make Legatia, pop the Link 1 and hope. So I pop the Link 1, I draw into a Sark, which is nice. He makes another Link 1, so I'm like, okay, I don't know what these cards do, I'm just going to push it back. I push it back. He's able to continue playing. And the most important thing is he has this card that is basically like a creature swap. So he gives me his level 1, and he takes my Execute. So, and then he goes end phase. But, you know, it's if he doesn't have like anything to back it up, it's like, okay, he has one execute. I have an adjudicator and grave that is live. So I can just start with the adjudicator and force something. So I go to adjudicator to pop the execute. He goes Metaltronus, but I ash the Metaltronus, so that won't resolve. And then I bring out with the adjudicator the Silvera. Remember, this is not just a Mystic Turbo card. You can bring out whatever, Silvera or Arciella. And he brings out this card. So this one has a trigger effect where he can book 2, and then it's a when effect where if I activate a card or effect, he can bounce it and then special summon 2 yummy monsters from his graveyard. But because I'm turn player, my Silvera will be Chainlink 1, and if I don't do anything, if I don't respond to him, he has to choose between using the trigger or using the when effect. I don't want him to get both, so I just allow him to trigger Chainlink 2. I don't respond, so he doesn't get to, get 2 cards from grave. I Sark, and then he scoops it up. So my final thoughts on this deck right now are, I think as like a pure-ish version of this deck, this is like a pretty interesting way to play. I really like the fact that you can check for Ash, which is like the most popular played non-engine right now. I think the deck is quite fun. I think there are not that many bricks in the deck. Even cards like Curse are, unbricked depending on what's in your hand, and honestly that's kind of the nature of this deck. It's not just as simple as this card is bad or good depending on if you win the dice roll, unless you're talking about stuff like Subversion, which is obviously not good going first, and then Adjudicator is just like always a brick. But I think this is worth testing more, and I think that the extra deck needs to be fine-tuned. I think Chirizo probably won't make the cut. I think Dugarius is pretty interesting, and I probably consider still playing this, especially to play around Nib if I'm not on Susurrus. But yeah, if you have any suggestions, let me know. If you want to join the Discord where we talk about deck theory and stuff, feel free to do that. Shout out to Mr. Yacht, because I was talking about this deck with him, and that's why I posted this today. So yeah, thanks for watching.